It's the first time any of our arms have been outside the lab. So we are taking the neural cuff here, 16 sets of electrodes, quad op amp differential, EMG electrodes. Those electrodes are just going to sit on the surface of my skin, and they're going to listen to the electrical fields that are coming out of my body. Powered on, powered on. Let's flex my hand and train it. It's going to take 3 seconds of data, and then now it's going to move the hand.
Wow.
Okay, and then now in 3 seconds, it should open the hand. So the fingers collided a little bit, and then now I can.
That's so cool.
So obviously I just did hand open close. You could do each individual finger. I can differentiate between all those. So you can get all elbow, all 3 degrees of freedom of the wrist.
You literally
each
just have to do it
individual
one
finger.
time?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Intuitively, it seems like you would need much more data, right? Because I'm sure there's lots of junk electrical signal. It's probably a pretty weak electrical signal that's actually escaping through the nerves, through the muscle,
And
through
it
the
is,
skin.
right? Yeah.
Like it seems like you would need to some way to pick more signal out of all that noise, but you can do it with just one. That's crazy.
I think that, what's funny about that though, is that gets to, I think, the future of where this stuff is going, because you're dead right. Like this stuff definitely right now is very simple in its implementation, which is great because you can get this utility out of it.
Wow.
You can literally just kind of joystick, each joint back and forth. But like, what can't you do? You can't do like really sophisticated proportional control. Like, do I want to open my elbow this fast, or do I want to do it like this fast? Or simultaneous control. Like, do I want to open my elbow while rotating my wrist? Or, all right, calm down. Yeah, I wonder if it still works right now. Yep.
Wow.
And there's a lot of other stuff like, how do you, here, I'll close the hand if you want.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, anyway, there's a lot that I think we need to get closer to the nerves for,
Yeah, makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. But that's one of the decisions you guys made is don't go inside to get to the nerves. Like
Not
you're
yet.
not yet.
Yeah.
All right, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Well, we'll leave it at the tease for now. That's perfect.
Fair enough, right? Yeah.
So I'm curious. So let's like take a step back. And why don't you just like tell us what we're seeing? So you guys have made this. This is the second version of your arm. This is the first time that an arm has ever been outside the factory, or the second version of the arm?
It's the first time any of our arms have been outside the lab.
It is an honor, truly, for you to bring it to our space factory.
No one
It
I'd
went
rather
from
do
factory
it,
to
man.
factory, but so it's never been in a a house or something.
I was told a long time ago, if Christian Kyle calls you and says, "Can you bring your artificial arm over?" Don't wait.
That's my reputation, man. The artificial arms find their way to me. That's really that's what it is. No, I'm why don't you tell us what it is? Like tell us what you built, what it's for, and why you're so excited about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we built what's called the Atom Touch, which is an artificial arm. What that really means, of course, is it's a wearable robotic arm. And we made it because turns out there's 100 million people in the world who have limb loss or difference, like they've lost their arm or their leg, or if they've lost some part of it, like a finger, or there's just a lower section. And for the most part, like they all still use really outdated prosthetics. So over 90% of people who lose their arm still use hooks, like from the Civil War hooks.
That's wild.
Yeah,
They're
and they
just
cost
mechan-
25 grand.
They don't move. It's just like a static.
It's
thing.
literally just an open and close hook. And the way that you control it or actuate it is with a bike cable. And
Wow.
you literally run the cable up your body and over to your opposite armpit of your intact arm. And then just when you move your shoulder forwards and backwards, it pulls the hand open or closed. Yeah, I know. Like the great innovation like 50 years ago was, you can actually make it so that it's opposite now. So when you pull your arm, it closes it. Oh, but what if you want to open it instead when you push your arm forward? So,
Jeez.
And then there's kind of like new stuff now, these myoelectric prosthetics, they'll look a little bit more like this, but they're so outdated. They came out before like Facebook came out. They haven't been redesigned since then.
Wow.
They don't have AI. They don't have really any sophisticated machine learning. They don't have individual finger control, except for one of them. They don't have touch feedback of any kind. So how are you supposed to know if you grabbed something? It's really difficult.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell us about the market basically. So like of all the prosthetic limbs that exist out there, at the very low end of the market, you have like the hook. At the very top end of the market, like what do you have actually? Is this like the top end, most expensive money can buy kind of thing, or are there like tiers beyond that can do crazier?
This
things?
is definitely the most advanced prosthetic arm in the world. Like not even a question for sure. Yeah. Maybe even by an order of magnitude in terms of capability that it restores. So there's really just two ends of the spectrum. To your point, there's like those hooks. we're just talking about arm loss here. Leg loss
Sure.
is different, but kind of the same concept. You get the hooks on one end, which are 25 grand on average, like billed to your insurance, and then typically you pay 20% copay. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you have what's called myoelectric prosthetics. Myo meaning muscle, so just when you flex your muscles, it'll move the arm in some way. And those are $200,000 on average. Yeah,
Jesus.
I know.
Damn.
And those are the ones you see in like the YouTube videos or like Instagram reels when they're like, "Oh, advanced bionic arm."
Is this what's being shown in
It's
your
it's
Instagram feed that you just have like
yeah, that's all I have at this point. That
just
and
electric?
puppies,
Yeah.
but yeah,
That,
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
not a bad combo. Yeah. I've never, I
Yeah.
can't say that I've had one of those show up, honestly. It's that I think that is actually
Really?
specific to you. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But
I think that was kind of the light bulb for me, by the way, was when we sold our last company, like 5 years ago. I was talking to some friends who had lost limbs and they just never wore prosthetics. And it just kind of clicked for me one day. I was like, wait, why aren't you wearing one though? Like, if I feel like I've seen those crazy good arms, quote unquote, in videos, and they were like, oh, those can't do basically any more than a hook. Like, they just open and close the hand, can't control individual fingers, can't do all sorts of stuff with them. They're super heavy, they're uncomfortable, so no one wears them.
this is something that wasn't obvious to me before we had started talking, which is
Really?
basically like that. Yeah, that it would be heavy because like my arm
Oh
is on
yeah.
my body and it is heavy. Like, have you ever had like your arm fall asleep?
Yeah,
Like you're
totally.
just like, it's like, oh my god. Like
Have you ever
how,
done like a nerve block?
no, 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 but I'm
Yeah,
sure it's the same idea. Like I've slept on it and literally had no, like couldn't move it, couldn't
same
really.
thing. Yeah.
It's like so heavy, but like,
Yeah.
but so I'm carrying around a very heavy arm
Yep.
all the time, but it's not. I don't care. Like
Well,
it
that's because you
doesn't.
lift, but yeah.
Yeah, because I'm so strong. But no, but for real. But like
No, seriously, yeah.
it seems like you should have it shouldn't be heavy to carry around a prosthetic limb,
No.
but it is.
Yeah. They, on average, the prosthetic hook arms might be a couple few pounds, which isn't the worst. But a myoelectric arm, if you're talking a full arm, you're talking somewhere between like 5 to 10 pounds, which isn't the worst. But so like I think like 160 pounds right now, and
Mm-hmm.
average human arm is 5% of your body weight each. So if you're 100 pounds, each arm is 5 pounds. If
Mm-hmm.
you're 200 pounds, each arm is 10 pounds. Mine's about 7.5 pounds. Probably yours is maybe somewhat similar. But if you had to hang a 7 pound weight off your shoulder, that's what wearing a prosthetic is like, because you don't have all the connective tissue to support it. So it's more like you're literally just you're cantilevering a dumb weight off your body. So what does everyone
That
do?
makes sense.
They get
That
all
makes
these like
sense.
back issues and stuff.
You know what it actually reminds me of is like holding my baby. Like my baby's
Yeah.
like literally like if I had to do that constantly, like it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
It is extra weight, but it's like it's not like attached to you is the right way to say it. Like your arm is
Yeah.
very attached. There's
Well,
a lot of
you
like
probably know this better. I mean, on Twitter, you literally said your baby's like going to be 1,000 pounds or something, right? And like,
7 trillion.
Yeah, 7
actually.
trillion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And was it at now 1 trillion?
Close. No,
Okay.
no.
All right.
Exponentials take time. It takes time to
Yeah,
take off. He's
fair
still a
enough.
very normal baby. But then
Okay,
he'll
Ray
be like,
Kurzweil. Yeah,
exactly.
sure. Yeah. No, totally.
Exactly. No, but okay. So I think that's one of the things that's unique about you guys, though, is the way that you've. So we'll talk about a lot of different parts of it. I would definitely want to talk about the in-finger actuators because that's super cool. We'll talk about the like AI and the machine learning part of it for sure. But maybe one part for now is just that because we're talking about is like how it feels and how it like attaches. Like I think that is a unique thing about
Yeah.
yours, isn't it?
Yeah, and I didn't bring that shoot. I'll bring it next time.
Yeah. Deal.
But yeah, our arm right now, like this arm right here, you can see I can just pick it up, right? Like
Yeah.
no problem. This whole thing is about 4 pounds right now. And that's based on what? Elbow
Peripheral.
actuator, wrist actuators, finger actuators, and the battery in the assembly.
Can I hold it?
Yeah, absolutely. Get in there.
Wow. Yeah, that's not that heavy.
Yeah, but now, right? It's not that heavy, like you said.
Yeah, but if I had to
imagine
hold it there the
holding
entire, yeah, exactly.
for 8 hours.
Totally.
Yeah. And so the goal is really two things with weight. One is, and this is like any prosthetic company should do this. We shouldn't be the only ones that are taking on this problem, which is a whole other thing. But the goal should be two things. One, to make it literally as light as possible. And the second is make the perception of its weight as low as light as possible. And so when we do surveys, we used our test users. They typically say it feels like it weighs about a pound, pound and a half. Yeah. We had to come up with a whole term, just perceived weight. But it's not like fancy or anything, but yeah, weight versus perceived weight. So the arm weighs about 4 pounds. Users typically report it feels like it weighs. Its perceived weight is about a pound and a half. And that's the whole arm, right? That's not just the hand. That's what you don't even see here too, which is like the socket over here and everything. And the way that we do that is instead of those bike cable prosthetic hooks where it has literally just like a harness that's piece of cloth, basically, it just goes under your armpit.
And just like squeezes you. Like
Yeah, right. So you get all this like kind of like you were just doing like
you kinda-
pinching
totally.
and
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's super painful. Like no
Mm.
one likes it.
Yeah.
So then they don't wear them. So it kind of doesn't matter how good the arms even are because they just won't wear them. Though we're just going to solve all of that. But um, when they put them on, it caused all these back issues and everything. So what we did is we just said, forget all that, go back to the drawing board. If we were Nike, if we were Apple, which a lot of our team is obviously, like, what would we do? And we just said, well, there's all this great new apparel. There's all this great new soft goods. There's great material science now. We know how to enable things like stiction and friction inside of, soft goods materials. And we said, let's make a shirt instead of a little piece of cloth that goes in your armpit. And let's put a little semi-rigid structure in it around your body so it doesn't rack and slide around. And then there's some preload in the material itself. So that would just mean like it actually snugs it up to your body a little bit. It takes the socket in the arm and pulls it up towards you. It's not uncomfortable or anything like that. You don't feel it. And so basically all that weight gets brought over to your body, your torso, and it just gets distributed and diffused across your body.
So this is such a dumb joke.
Oh my God.
No,
hit me.
you know Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, of course.
If you wanted to be founded by like Founders Fund, if you want to be funded by them, you should call
man.
that product Mithril.
Oh my God.
Let's go.
How have I never thought of this? All right, we're going to the Mithril mines.
Okay, let's do it, dude.
Okay, first of all, that's genius.
Do it.
You definitely got to do it. Yeah.
Steal it. But that's
Oh
what it is.
my
It's like you would wear it under your clothes, presumably. It's
Yep.
like a structure that kind of like, instead of it all just pulling on this arm, which still all the weight is here,
Yep.
it's distributed across your body, and it's kind of like that's cool.
Yeah, it's just a
Makes
lot
sense.
more like your actual tissue of your body, your muscles and your tissue. It just takes everything and kind of is effectively one large, tendon
Super
that pulls
smart.
everything over. Yeah. I think that in terms of like what people should expect, basically think of like, you ever wore like a really high performance bike shirt or anything
Yeah,
like that? Basically that.
totally.
Really light, wickable material, breathable. You could take it off, throw it in the washer, buy a couple, we'll make them affordable. Kind of the same with the cuff too. Like
Yeah.
it's meant to just rip the electrodes out, throw it in the wash. Like you wear shoes every day, you don't wear your same socks every day.
Yeah.
And people with prosthetics today mostly don't wear socks at all, actually.
Hmm.
They just like jam their
Yeah.
bare arm in there. It's just kind of bad all around.
Yeah, totally.
So we just said, let's just do the whole thing,
That's awesome.
The socket, the neural interface, the robot arm itself. And no one's done that before. I don't know why or how, but no one in the prosthetics industry right now offers a full solution. It doesn't exist in the world.
Most of the people just do one thing, or they don't have a cuff and they don't have the, like, you would buy a separate myoelectric sensor from the company that's building the arm that it interfaces with.
Usually a different company, actually. The two leading companies that make, so let's just talk about state of the art, right? The myoelectrics, because with hooks, you wouldn't use electrodes and stuff like that. So there's two big leading companies. Those two companies make basically 80% of the myoelectric hands in the world. One of them offers an elbow, the other doesn't. They both have wrists, but their wrists only rotate. They don't flex and extend or abduct, adduct. Actually, I think one of them might, but not both. Neither of them make sockets because that's considered its own industry. You have to go to a prosthetist, which is like a physical therapist, basically, in their own clinic. They will plaster, cast, mold your stump, and then they send that off to another industry called central fab or central fabrication, which makes the socket. And then you get that back like 2 months later and it doesn't fit. And so then they do what's called a revision socket. And then you do another 2 months. And like typically it takes 3 to 6 months to get a socket. And so you're just, not doing anything right after you go through this trauma and this amputation.
That's so wild. I mean, I think that this is one of the advantages of you being the founder of this company. Like, I think this is one of the reasons I was so excited to have this conversation, is because like when you started going after this idea, you didn't, like, your last startup wasn't a prosthetic startup, like not even close.
No.
Like you aren't like a PhD in biomechanics or something. Like that's not your background. Like your background is, you're an outsider of this industry. You saw things that were very obviously wrong with it, and you said, let's do it better. And I think that's I think that's cool. I think that a lot of industries, or a lot of like success stories in hardware, have a similar story to that. Like Elon didn't make cars. Like Elon figured out how to learn how to make rockets by like reading the book when he was pissed that he couldn't buy a rocket from the Russians. Like there's all these crazy
tries
stories.
to buy the ICBM, basically, fails at it. I'll just do the whole thing.
Exactly.
I mean, I think a lot of us probably think of that a lot, right? Like the Thanos sticking your hand in the Infinity Glove. Like, I'll just do it myself then, if no one else is going to do this. Yeah. I feel like, actually, funny enough, that goes back to the name of this show, First Principles, right? And that comes from Elon too, which, like, again, why? Why hasn't anyone done this? I don't get it. I mean, there's kind of one company that's done it, but not really. There's 100 million people who've lost limbs. Diabetes is skyrocketing, so leg amputation is skyrocketing. Somewhere between 30 and 50 million people are born with limb difference. Like, it's not a small group of people. I just think that the healthcare industry, yeah, to your point, is like a really outside of the idea space of most Silicon Valley. It's like if you're a healthcare founder, it's
Totally.
typically like, oh, he's a healthcare founder.
Or
he
like
just
it's
does
like
healthcare.
drug discovery or things like it's not like
Yeah.
we're not doing the intersection of
Yeah.
like healthcare and robotics
Yeah.
is exceedingly small. There's like I guess
You might be looking at it basically.
I
Yeah.
know it's this and like the surgery robots. My
Okay,
brother's
fair
a
enough.
surgeon. He does
Yeah.
the crazy like he goes in the hood and he does the
Oh,
thing.
really?
It's like super
He does
cool.
like the whole Da Vinci surgical
Oh
robot,
yeah,
all
yeah,
that.
with a million degrees of freedom thing.
Yeah. I know. Actually, our medical director asked me once, "Hey, how small can we make the hand?" I was like, "Oh, we could probably make it pretty small," thinking he means like child
Right.
size. And I was like, "Why do you ask?" He goes, "Well, I'd really love to do, my brain surgeries."
Little baby hands.
I was like, "Right? Imagine the tiniest little hand. Like those ones you put on your fingertip."
When you ask a person what they want, they say faster horse. When you ask a doctor what they want, they say smaller hands.
Tiniest
little
hand.
tiny.
Yeah.
That's so fucking funny. That'd be hilarious.
And we get a lot done at AtomLimbs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
We're leading the normal sized hand industry and the tiny hands industry.
Yeah, no, totally.
That's okay. Well, let's talk about the different sort of like decisions that you had to make when you were deciding.
Yeah.
Okay, you have the problem, which is there are lots of people with limb difference. There are not a lot of solutions that are working for them. They are choosing not to use them.
Right.
So when you decided to go after this, I mean, presumably there were like tons of decisions you had to make. You had to decide myoelectric or not. That might have been an easy one because there's just a lot more that you can do with it. What were the other like big decision points that led you ultimately to this thing?
That's a great question. The one like North Star goal we have, and our company mission is to just restore as much physical ability as possible. And I don't think that's actually been the mission of prosthetics companies for the most part till today. Like, obviously they want to help people. That's not a question. I don't think they're bad people or anything. But I think if you wanted to restore maximum physical ability, you have to look in a very different domain space than what prosthetics is today. And it's really like three things. And this gets directly to your question. One is, what human scale robotics, what those can do, not just any robotics. Like to your point with 1X or, any of those companies, like those hands are either larger than a human hand or they're heavier than a human hand or they're tendon based. And so you can't, just kind of chop the hand off the arm, so to speak, and use it, which can work for them. But in this case, we got to address all levels of limb loss. The second is the neural interface. So myoelectric, to your point. Yeah, and we knew myoelectric was the way to go right away because we didn't want to go invasive right away. That was just like, hey, we're not going to do that. At some point, I think it'd be smart, but that's too much to ask with our first product, small company, new startup. And then the third, is the attachment, the socket and all that. And so I think robotics versus neural interface versus socket, or really just the attachment which goes in the shirt, were very different in terms of where we started. When we started, for sure, we thought the arm was going to be the hardest part, the robot. It turns out, actually, the shirt was the hardest part. Yeah. In terms of like what we didn't know when we began. It's just like not a common thing. There's not a lot of products in the world where you're hanging weight off your body and you're trying to diffuse that weight. So we had to figure out a lot of that with just raw R&D. A lot of stacking up different materials. We tried wetsuits. We were just sweating in these things. It's like 80 degrees in the office, just drenched in sweat. We tried light materials, heavy materials, all that. But the arm and the neural cuff with myoelectric. So where did we start in terms of controlling it? We asked ourselves two questions. One was, what is the state of the art today in terms of whether it's commercial or research, because we could commercialize something that's stuck in research. And two is, what's the risk versus reward? So going in reverse order with risk versus reward, all I mean is if we're going to cut you open, the reward needs to be worth it, right? The juice has to be worth the squeeze. And there's just not quite enough there yet with embedded invasive neural interfaces. Like there, for example, is not a commercial wireless peripheral nerve interface. Basically, there's no like Neuralink for your peripheral nerves. Hint, right? We might be interested in that. And then in terms of capability, we knew immediately myoelectric could give you the state of the art today, which is you can open and close the elbow, you can control the wrist degrees of freedom, you can open and close the hand. What the state of the art had not done, except in research, was show can you control individual fingers at higher levels of limb loss.
That makes sense.
Yeah, right. Higher you go, harder it is to get that signal.
More signals, that more like diffusion of the signals or whatever from like,
Yep.
because you're not, I don't know, you have to control your fingers down here. That's
It's
where the
so many degrees of freedom, and you're basically getting it off of 5 muscle heads, right? 2 bicep heads, 3 tricep heads,
Hmm.
and you have 5 peripheral nerves. So they're not plugged into those heads directly, but that's the theoretical maximum you could get, is you could take one nerve and plug it into each muscle
Huh.
head. So you could get basically 5 truly differentiable
Interesting.
degrees of freedom,
Okay.
but the signals are fine enough that you can get more than that. So we are the first, and we were the first to basically commercialize individual finger control.
Hmm.
There's no prosthetic arm that has individual finger control in the world, not even for like partial hand amputation, let alone a full
Yeah.
arm. We can do it at any level on the first try, first shot.
How did you know it was possible?
It was done in research
Hmm.
about 10, 15 years ago, and they didn't commercialize it for some
Hmm.
reason. I'm not entirely sure why. Do you know about the revolutionizing prosthetics program DARPA and
No, I haven't
DoD
heard. No.
did? So in 2005, DARPA, DoD, I don't know, it was like 20 or 30 million, I want to say. They assigned 30 million, let's say, to what they called the Revolutionizing Prosthetics 2009 program. So in
Okay.
2005, they basically thought they'd be done by
Okay.
2009.
Classic.
And now that it's 2009, we fixed it all. So
Yeah,
clearly
perfect.
they worked. That basically funded 2 organizations. One was Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and the other was DECA, Dean Kamen's Idea Lab, the inventor of the Segway and a bunch of other stuff, obviously. And they both had one task, which was try to create effectively this, give an arm back to wounded warriors. And it has to have, every degree of freedom, including individual finger control. Ideally, it has touch feedback. It's light. It's all that stuff. DECA ended up about 10 years later commercializing what they call the Luke arm after Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. And that's probably the most state-of-the-art arm in the world in terms of it's a whole arm. You can control all the degrees of freedom except, again, individual fingers. They did some real wackadoo stuff with it where like one of the control methods is you put an IMU on your shoe and then they can
Really?
move your foot around to control it. You could control it with the EMG on your arms. I just think they, really wanted to get out there. Johns Hopkins never ended up commercializing any of their arms, but they created what was called the modular prosthetic limb, or the MPL, which almost everyone in Silicon Valley has probably seen in a YouTube video or it was like on 60 Minutes, PBS
Okay.
NewsHour, all sorts of stuff 10 years ago. But again, it's 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So like just super outdated,
Crazy.
Yeah. A world's respect for all those teams. Oh my gosh. Like standing on the shoulders of giants for sure. But they did it in research, so we knew it could be possible.
So that was the sensor. The sensor, you knew that it was possible to get from signals that are all the way up here on your arm down to individual finger control.
Yeah.
Were there a lot of decisions to make about like the materials that you use for that thing, or there were?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, you have to consider, it can't be toxic, obviously, kind of the first order things. Second order, does it just hold up if you like wash it, if it gets in rain, if it gets dirty, all the ingress protection stuff. And then third order is like comfort, like do you actually enjoy, not even just are you satisfied with, but do you enjoy wearing it all day? Really, does that mean do you forget about wearing it?
Yeah.
So we did a lot. I mean, we went through, this is what I'm holding right now. This neural cuff prototype is probably our 30th prototype, maybe 40th. And we went through everything from trying like 8 electrodes versus 16 versus 32 versus infinity.
What's the infinity electrode? Is that real or is it no?
No, that's not a real thing.
What's the
I'll
most
try to
you
come
ever
up with
put
some
on it?
witty answer. 42, I don't know.
42, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, sure. The meaning of life.
Yeah, the infinity electrode. That'd be the next Marvel
I was
movie.
like, maybe this is real. This is the thing. Every once in a while, I'm like, is it real or is it not? I have to ask. But no, I was like, maybe it's continuous.
No,
like a
I wish it was real.
continuous, one big, gigantic.
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
wouldn't it
that could
just
be infinity.
One.
I don't know.
So this is why you can't
So
get
probably
2
not.
Minnesotans in the same place, though, right? We're just gonna goad each other into this all the time.
Exactly.
But yeah, we did a whole bunch of different electrode setups. We did different geometries of electrodes, different size electrodes, different depth of electrodes. Obviously, on the firmware and software side, just tuning and trying a lot of different things in terms of how much attenuation do you have to do or anything like that. And then the materials themselves, like the soft goods materials, we started mostly with like wetsuit materials, neoprene and stuff like that, because it gives you the stiction against the body. But then we had to start just hacking away at everything. So we went to like literal apparel fairs. Like we would like fly around the country and go to apparel festivals and just like look at hundreds of different pieces of materials.
Hmm.
And then we'd get a bunch of samples and we would stack them up in different ways that we had high conviction would work. And most of them didn't work that great. And then eventually one did, and we kept pushing that forward.
That's actually so I would put that as like a brute force method of solving that problem.
Yeah,
It's like
really
we're just gonna go find every material that exists and like just see what's out there. I think on the opposite end of that spectrum would be like full analytical. Like we think about
yeah.
here are the material properties that we need. Here's what we know have those material properties. Let's go find that exact thing. Like is that
Yeah,
a fair way to say it? And I'm curious, like
I
if
think
you
so.
do you have to debate between those, or is it just like I mean, no one's gonna like do equations about like,
Yeah,
what are
right,
you
like sitting at a whiteboard. I
yeah,
mean,
the
we would do
map.
that with we would do that approach with other things that aren't soft goods, like the electrodes themselves,
Hmm.
starting from understanding the actual physics behind these things and stuff like that. But with the soft goods, yeah, it was mostly brute force. I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, also our team has a lot of background in that. So, like our chief design officer, one of my co-founders, Doug Satsker, he was in the ID lab at Apple for I don't know
Hmm.
10 or 20 years, starting in like '96, I think, or something like that. So he's got a deep background, and I think he really knows where to lead us and that stuff. So we started with a lot of really strong hypotheses based on those principles, but since no one had done it before, yeah, we just had to go figure it out.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Let's talk about other hardware on the arm and the hand. So, I think one of the things that makes this thing most unique, tell me if I'm wrong, is
Yeah.
that there are individual actuators in the fingers, as opposed to like
Yes.
just one actuator that kind of like pulls a thread or something that makes it all bend. Is that
Yeah.
is that true?
Yep.
And is it like and why?
Yeah. Why? Okay.
what's
Fair.
what, what's the advantage of doing it that way?
You could use just the hand or the whole arm
Okay,
because everything can live in the hand. So that's advantageous because some people lose their whole arm, some people lose just 3 fingers. So we have to be able to support all those levels.
got it. And so are there benefits to strength or disadvantages to strength, or like benefits to flexibility or disadvantages to flexibility of choosing the individual actuator design as opposed to like some
Yeah.
sort of more tendony type thing?
Yeah, there's a lot of trade-offs. I wouldn't be so bold as to say, for example, like, oh, everyone should do it this way. That weight is a real thing. We
Hmm.
have more metal, more distal from the body. Obviously, you usually want to keep
Yeah,
it closer to the body.
totally.
The requirements we, for the most part, need to meet are like, can you do it with your human arm? And like
Sure.
most people can't lift a 100-pound bicep curl with their human arm, or like crush like a soda can down to size of a penny.
Yeah.
So we don't need to do that. What we need to be able to do is what we call the everyday tasks. So the way we approach speed and weight and torque and all that stuff is, okay, can you pick up your kid's backpack with it? Can you pack a lunch? Can you open a car door? Can you shake someone's hand? Can you wave to someone?
Hmm.
Like social communication isn't a thing with prosthetics today, even
Hmm.
though we use our limbs for that. And so it's actually it's just strong enough to be able to hold a bag of groceries or your briefcase. Um, and there has to be back drivability in the fingers because you can't get it stuck on something. So all drove the design decisions. Yeah.
So I think like it's been in the news like 1x thanks to
Yeah.
me and my friends basically.
Good job, by the
Yeah.
way.
Thanks, Jason. For really, but that's been really in the like talk of the town recently over the past couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and their approach is very much like a safety first, like let's make this as like the safest that you can possibly be around people
Yeah.
because it's going to be deployed to a home. Obviously, this thing is deployed to the real world from the first day it's used.
Yeah.
So safety with all of this, with all of the like the strength properties and the way that you're training it and anything else, like what sort of things like safety wise do you have to take into account when you're building this thing and setting it off in the world?
Yeah. Well, one thing you don't have to really adjust for safety wise is it's not autonomous. So,
Dang it.
you know,
Yeah.
the humans
It's
controlling
true.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you do have to control for is like, did they intend to do that thing nonetheless? So that's why we're very, very strict, for example, about we only move it when you very clearly intend to move it. The arm will only move if it detects a signal that's very high conviction. And you can like train that and dial that in over time. Also, yeah, again, with motors, have to be back drivable. It has to be quiet. Safety isn't just about like, could it physically harm something or someone? It's also like, could you pierce someone's ear? Is it too loud when you're trying to get on a phone call? That might not be safety, but it's courtesy. There's a lot of stuff like that. It has to be in the real world. So ingress protection is very important too. So dirt and water and things like that. Obviously, this doesn't have a lot of ingress protection on it right now. The final product will. And it's meant, you should be able to hold it under a sink and like wash dishes, maybe not take a shower or submerge it in water, but so it has to be safe in terms of it can't short circuit or anything like that if you do that. EMI shielding, there's digital safety, so hacking. Dick Cheney got that pacemaker, whatever, 20 years ago, and everyone was worried, right? Like, what if someone hacks it? He's the vice president of the most powerful nation in the world. Thank God that didn't happen. This is kind of the same concept here, right? Like, you don't want someone to be able to hack your arm. That's very dystopian, cyberpunk. We like being cyberpunk, not that way.
Different kind, yeah.
Yeah.
How many versions did you say that the cuff went through? Like
About 30.
dozens or 30? So, okay,
Yeah.
so you're on V31 of the cuff.
Yeah, exactly.
What version is this? This is the second.
This
whole
be our
arm?
Gen 2 arm and Gen 2
arm.
hand.
Okay.
And inside that, the motors, the actuators and stuff have gone through dozens of iterations.
Okay, so like walk us through that. So like from the very first like worst prototype that you built that technically worked, like to now, like what are the big big upgrades, big things that had to change, either like architecturally or just like performance wise? Like I'm just curious to see that, like what was the progression?
A lot, boy, yeah. Okay, so day 0, we had nothing, right? We had a sketch on a whiteboard, and we said, where do we start? Well, we could start on the cuff. No, don't do that. We can just go get a bunch of EMG electrodes. Oh, we can start on the shirt. Don't worry about that. Just put it on a stand. Okay, let's start with the robotics. Okay, let's go and look. Can we find actuators that work for what we need? And our hypothesis in the beginning was elbow, wrist, and finger actuators should all be their own local actuation, so nothing remote inside the arm. And turns out, basically, there are no actuators in the world that can fit inside of finger flanges that can give you the torque requirements, the performance requirements. So we had to design those from scratch.
Damn.
And that was the first thing we did. Yeah. And Josh, our head of physical design, just knocked it out of the park, honestly, like basically on the first try. And he turned it in. It was like, oh, okay, well, good job. Let's go to the next thing,
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he's a wizard, for
Is that
sure.
so the V1 actuators are still in there, or the actuators have more versions now, but
no,
the V1
those would be
worked.
our, oh, don't hold me to this, I think Gen 4 actuators in the fingers. Yeah. The elbow and the wrist are Gen 2, and the fingers are farther along.
Got it.
Yeah. Actually, we literally just put those fingers on, I think, like 3 weeks ago. So
really? Nice.
No one outside of 15 people in the world besides you has seen that.
You, dear listeners.
Support
awesome.
Your local podcast host today.
Hell yeah. So okay, what else has changed from V1 to V however many we are with these things?
So V1 had nothing internal in the forearm. So all the support systems like power, compute was all external. It was all in a backpack that people would wear. We put it on a desk. So Gen 2, everything's inside, except for basically these umbilicals we've got right here that just helps for debugging the actuators. So then I can literally just turn them on and off with a switch behind me. But other than that, everything lives in here now. So there's a battery in the forearm, computes half in here and half in this bag. All these cables will be gone as soon as we just put that basically in there. And I think probably the biggest thing that was the biggest departure from when we started was, so the actuators were a big deal, but it was really how do you control them in unison? So there was a lot of experimentation around how do we make the hand look natural? Because with a tendon-based system, you're literally just under actuating, right? You're just pulling the whole finger with linkages to just do this. Everyone's got their 4-bar linkage or whatever. So what we said was, no, we want to talk over CAN or whatever, to all the actuators independently. And so actually the way it works even right now is each individual flange is moving on its own. So you're controlling it and saying, let me just close the hand or just flex this one finger example.
Sure.
But the arm itself is actually moving each individual actuator independently. And getting something that looks kind of naturalistic takes a lot of training and tuning and stuff like that.
That is funny. It's just so obvious to us or whatever what to do, but then like you try to tell a machine how to do it and it's like just doing like weird motion. Like,
right. Well, I mean, you've got a kid right now.
Yeah.
I mean, your kid's probably still picking it up, right?
He definitely doesn't have it yet. He's full on, like it's funny to see the stages that they go through too, because it's like first phase is just whacking stuff. Like you have no fine control at all. You're just whacking.
You flail and find.
But then now he's got this now. He's got like this is a new skill that he can sort of do it. He can pick up. He loves the puffs or whatever. Have you know about
the
this?
Puffs?
The kids are all about the puffs.
Okay,
They're these little rice puff things, like the little treats.
Oh,
they just love that. They kind of look like dog treats, honestly. It's kind of like, but we were told it from other parents, and it's a good idea.
So it's like a Rice Krispie but bigger.
We trained basically, yeah. It's like a little. It looks like a star, and so but this is the reward. That was what trained him. Was how to.
He's got his pinch grip.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, yeah. Well, next you can move him to like a key grip.
Yeah.
Maybe like a lateral grip.
Good segue. Advanced. There's a lot of different things, different combinations of stuff here. I think you told me that other arms do multiple grips and
Yeah,
things,
that's right.
but they have to train the individual. Like you're not training like individual fingers to do this. You're like
No.
you're saying,
Yeah.
okay, this is my key grip or this is my pincer or something.
Yeah, they basically all have like the same 5 to 10 preset grips,
Hmm.
and they're not trained out of the box. You have to train each however you want to. And typically the most used one is called a power grip.
Just
Grab
grab
a can,
fully.
grab
Yeah.
whatever, yeah. And then lateral grip and key grip and pinch grip, I think, are the most common
Hmm.
ones. But yeah, no, they you can't even train the fingers individually if you wanted to. There's not even an
Yeah.
option in those arms. And even if they wanted to put that in software, they have to redesign their hardware
Yeah.
because there's not actuators in the flanges.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that's we basically said, let's do all that. Give everyone full control. You can just train the hand to open and close if you want. You could do individual fingers independently if you want. You could
Yeah.
do each individual flange if you want.
Mm.
That's probably a little bit beyond external myoelectric control
Sure.
today, that last one, but
Sure.
certainly an actual direct nerve interface can
Okay,
do that.
let's talk about. So I want to get to software. I want to talk
Sure.
about like the AI ML stuff. I think the lead in though is what you just said, which is basically like the data. So when you're getting the data from the cuff, like again, my intuition still says it should be so bad. It should be so messy and like full of noise and like I guess maybe it is. I guess it must be consistent because I can very repeatedly do actions with high
Absolutely.
trust that they're going to
Yeah.
happen or
That's
whatever.
muscle memory or
um,
neuroplasticity. Is what
Sure,
you're
sure.
talking
Like
about. Yeah.
but I can just do this 1,000 times, and I know every single time I'm gonna do it the right way.
Yeah.
So I guess that means that the data that's coming from my brain down to my fingers is very consistent and repeatable, and like therefore would be
Yep.
able to be picked up by some sort of like AI machine learning thing.
Yeah, I think probably this to the spirit of what you're talking about. It's in the differentiation that the magic lies. Because if you just train one degree of freedom, that's really easy because you're not differentiating against anything. You're not saying like, let me open
Oh,
my hand
interesting.
and close my hand and control my elbow and my fingers. The machine learning has to be able to differentiate between all those. So, just doing one or two, anyone in the world could do that within reason. Doing 26 degrees of freedom is quite a bit more complicated. And so one of the things we do, for example, is not just training up every degree of freedom, but for people who potentially, like, for example, have less restoration so far, like say they just got, or say they're 20 years ago they got amputated, so their neuroplasticity has really gone down, their muscle memory has gone down, the neural pathways are really not reinforced. We could just, for example, say, hey, when you want to control the hand, just use the hand, turn off the elbow. So you could just manually do that. We can also automatically do that. You can do all sorts of stuff with dynamic modeling. So you can like literally choose to shift between the model for the elbow. There's the model for the hand. So we can say, for example, okay, when you reach out and you want to grab something, maybe, you just want to open and close the hand at that point. So you can trigger the arm to say, kind of like automations, hey, it's the elbow is at this position or has been moved in this way. Lock it now automatically. So I can just open and close my hand.
Interesting. What is so do you have to train does the user get to control that? Like they get to say, I am now locking this. They think it or whatever, or they right?
Yeah,
Or
there's 3 different
press a
ways you
button
can
or
just
something?
tell the arm, hey, just kind of do it for me, but let me know you're doing it.
But really what I mean
yeah.
is they're not saying, hey arm, stop moving. They're not saying like, hey Siri or whatever. Like,
Oh no, like out
how is
loud,
it actually
no.
happening? Like
In the iPhone app or on the video screen.
oh, okay, cool.
Yep.
The video screen?
Yeah, shit.
Oh shit, that's cool.
Yes, there is no video screen on this one right now, but yes, yeah.
We don't have to conclude that if you don't want to. But
That's all good.
really fucking cool.
I think I've probably talked about it at some point.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
You watch a movie just like on your
Yeah, exactly. Put your Vision Pro on. You can do 2.
There you go.
No, totally.
Okay, cool. So they whatever, they lock the arm and then they can just control a more fine thing that because you're focusing on fewer degrees of freedom makes it easier to
It's just making it
focus on or
useful
whatever.
to you as a user. That's the whole point, right? So I think a lot more control is what they need, not less control, and a lot more visibility into what's happening versus less visibility. Like, I don't think these people need to be parented into how to use their arm. They know how to use their arm. They just want to be able to use it. So yeah, but we can do a lot of smart things for them if they want.
Cool.
Or the arm
So,
can.
but you've teased now a couple times that someday you'll probably go like invasive and like get better data, presumably.
Yeah.
And so, that's the benefit. The benefit is if you can get closer to the actual nerves, then you get cleaner electrical signals, then you have better data to work with, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So, you've got 5 nerves in your arm. They're all about half the size of my pinky in diameter. You can see them. They're like electrical cables. Yeah, there's good research about that stuff right now. It's actually like kind of disheartening that I don't see more of the industry pushing after it, like commercializing it. I don't get why they don't. It's been around for 10 years.
Hmm.
You know, someone should make a wireless commercial peripheral nerve interface. If it has to be us, we'll do it. But yeah, I think the threshold, you know, is kind of like what we were talking about earlier. Like,
Yeah,
when
like
is
when
that
is it
worth
the
it?
time? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right now, what could you do with this arm? What's like the limit in terms of motor control? So forget sensory restoration. You know, you could do gross motor control for sure, moving the
Mhm.
elbow, the wrist, open, close the hand. You could do fine motor control, you know, flexing the individual fingers or doing things like pushing buttons or flicking switches. You probably can't do ultra fine control.
Hmm.
We haven't seen anyone do that yet, like writing
Play
cursive, playing a
piano.
piano.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just takes higher dexterity, and it takes higher muscle memory.
Hmm.
So you'd have to literally just reinforce those neural pathways over time, which could be done,
Hmm.
but it's going to be a lot more worth it if you can just get a direct interface to the nerve. And what that means is either, you know, you could put the electrodes on the surface of the skin. That's what everyone does today. It's what we do. You could put them just below the surface of the skin, so basically above the fat layer, below the fat layer, but
Yeah.
not actually toward, you know, around the nerve yet. And that's definitely better. Like, not a question, it's better. It's not so much better from what we've seen in research that we think
Hmm.
it's worth it. Transecting or cuffing a nerve, you can get a
Hmm.
lot more
Sure.
good
Yeah.
signal.
Makes sense.
Transecting a nerve, right? Yeah, though,
What
like,
does
probably
transect
not.
mean?
Inject the needle
Directly
into the
into the nerve?
nerve.
Okay.
Yeah, which now you're damaging a nerve.
Yeah.
I don't think that's worth it. Cuffing the nerve, you know, just literally just like a little sleeve like this that goes
Yeah.
around your nerve. That makes a lot of sense
Totally.
for sure. And then at some point you have to go to the finest level, which is the electrochemical junction where the action potentials happen. But I don't know that that actually has to happen. You might be able to just get
What
that
is
from
that?
cuff electrodes.
You lost me on that one.
Okay.
What is it?
So you have like the cable, the nerve that's
Sure.
like a cable that runs through your
Yeah.
arm. It's not just an electrical cable; it's electrochemical cable.
Hmm.
So all the your nerve is actually basically like, just call it like a million very tiny cells called axons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then those
Brain.
axons have,
The
yep,
same one. Yeah.
exactly, literally the same thing. So those axons have the dendrites across, you know, to travel across the synapse. The
Sure.
synapse between the axons is where
Sure.
the chemicals get sent, right?
Yeah.
So sodium, potassium, whatever, the molecules.
You're saying it needs to be
So like
small enough
if
and
you could get
precise
to
enough to
that,
get in there as opposed to, oh, okay, go interior to the nerve where that stuff's happening.
yeah.
As
But
but
that's
not, but you don't mean like a specific place in a specific nerve.
no.
Okay.
Yep, just kind of anywhere where you can get enough of the action potentials. But I just don't know if that's going to actually be required. You know, I think that would also require probably a breakthrough in technology at this point.
So I have a dumb question.
All right.
You said that there are 5 nerves.
Right.
There are more than 5 degrees of freedom.
Right.
How does that work?
It's mostly magic.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no, it's even though there's only 5 nerves, or really it doesn't matter what amount of nerves or muscles you have, as long as you can get differentiation between the electrical fields that are coming out, and that it just turns out you can. Yes, you have, let's say, 5 muscle heads, and you took each of the nerves and you plugged it into one. So you've got 5 muscles that'll actuate when you want to do something. There's enough differentiation in the muscle actuation, if that makes sense. So like if I wanted to like flex just my finger, it's going to look like a different pattern because literally the muscle flexed is different.
But my bicep and tricep aren't flexing when I'm moving my hand.
That's true. But if you're amputated, all your nerves that ran down to your fingers and your hand are now stuck all up there. So everything that innervated your hand is now all
Oh.
up here.
It's not that the nerves obviously don't migrate because I might have lost all those nerves, but you're saying that the electrical signal that would have flown all the way down my arm instead
Yep.
terminates at my bicep or something.
Yep.
So basically what you're doing is you're trying to pull finger data out of bicep and tricep only.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And you can tell when someone's trying to move a bicep versus trying to move a finger, like just electrically. Like they're
Yeah,
like,
literally. Also, you're not moving your bicep in the same way after you get an amputation.
really?
Because,
Sure.
well, I'd say
Makes
you're
sense.
amputated above your elbow. Like
Yeah,
your
that makes
bicep isn't attached to your elbow anymore.
Sure.
you
Yeah, that
know?
makes sense.
Yeah. But
Wow,
in
that
your
is-
brain, you still think of it the same way. So it doesn't
That
matter
is-
what your muscles do,
Yeah, that's
as long
definitely
as
my
you're
point.
trying to do it and there's enough differentiation in those signals.
Mine's sufficiently blown. That's like it's still kind of confusing to me because it's like what are those electrical signals? Because I know
Yeah.
that it's like there's some electricity stuff going on, like whatever, like I know like
Yeah.
chemical axons and dendrites, like
They're
I know
basically
that stuff,
ions
but like
leaving the synapses. So there's some lossiness that just kind of come out of your body.
but because each nerve is made of all those different axons or whatever, there's like a bunch of different combinations of them that correspond to different things, and that's what okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of real answer here is even you right now had that coming off your body. That's how I'm able to do this
Sure.
too, right?
Yeah.
So it's just there's always the electric field coming off. You can always listen to it. The big question was, can you differentiate between the different, degrees of freedom in that field that's coming off? And it turns out there's enough resolution that yes.
Hmm.
So kind of to your point, where could you not do that? You can't do it with EEG on your
Hmm.
head.
Hmm.
So not in your head,
Yeah.
like a Neuralink or something, but just something listening on top of your skull.
Hmm.
There's not enough signal coming out from your
Hmm.
motor cortex right here
Hmm.
to get that differentiation. You literally
Fascinating.
can't do it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it has to go through the skull and all that.
So the reason I asked that question was to try to get towards like talking more about the software side and the training and the AI and ML. But the core of it is still the data to me. It's like you can
Yeah,
only get as much you can only decode as much signal as is actually there. And
right.
so um I guess like what you're seeing then on the electrode is a, a different pattern of like power of different electrical signals coming off different places, and that's what you're trying to decode basically.
Pretty much, for the most part, you could just live off of amplitude if you really wanted,
Hmm.
just of the
Wow.
field coming off. But if you want to do real differentiation, you got to start doing more, feature extraction or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. And so basically the way that because we saw it get trained, like you did it in 1 second of just like
Sure. Yeah.
just one close, one open, and it automatically knew how to close and open.
Hmm.
Um, what that is it's looking at all the sensor data that's coming through, and the way that you
Yeah.
train it is by saying, I'm about to do this, and then you do it, and then
Yeah.
it sees that, and then it knows whenever I see that again, that's what is trying to
That's
happen.
exactly it. Like,
Okay.
call it just pattern matching. What you didn't see was I pressed a key, right, that said this represents hand open or hand close. So I could just as easily said, um, extend my elbow to
Sure.
open the hand.
Hmm.
So it's not the signals themselves mean nothing until you tell them they mean something.
Okay.
Yeah,
And does it get better over time as you're wearing the thing more, or
absolutely.
you just put it in training mode more often and you can have it record a bunch, or is it?
Yeah. It gets
Okay,
better from both sides. Like the arm itself gets better because you can add training to it if you want. And you get better
because
because
you
you get
know how
muscle
to.
memory and yeah, your neural pathways get reinforced, just like
Smart.
using your regular limbs.
Hmm, that's super smart. And is there anything like different or magical or whatever that you guys uniquely figured out for that, or are you using sort of more? I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
enough about this to ask like the smartest question on it, but basically, like, are you using a framework that already exists and is out there and other people know about, or did
Yeah.
you develop your own thing that is just better for this?
That's one of my favorite questions actually, because it's mostly stuff that's just already out there and
Cool.
we put it together in a special way. But anyone else could do it if they really wanted. There's some secret sauce in there, but it's not like trade secret or anything like that. It's just, hey, let's use more advanced machine learning than what existed 20 years ago, which is the state of the art today in prosthetics.
And is it high level, super high level? Is it more a function of you have built an existing model of like what all this data looks like? Like we've taken data from thousands of arms and we know what the signals look like generally, and then we can kind of correlate your thing with that amazing model? Or is it just brand new for you?
Right now, it's all purely personal to each user.
Wow,
There is no general model that gets fine
that's
tuned.
wild.
I mean, there kind of is, but it's not like a model in the sense we would think of like an LLM model.
Yeah.
It's just kind of out of the box machine learning, pattern rec. It's not LDA or linear discriminant analysis, but stuff like that.
Hmm.
So you could do it. I think the magic, honestly, is like you actually just have to put it on people and see what works.
Yeah,
And
totally.
no one, for whatever reason, has chosen to do that. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
wild. Tell us about that. Tell us about your
yeah.
testing with people, about like how many of these arms exist and how many people have tried them, and like how far are you from selling them to people?
Yeah, we got 37 people who've tested it now. All have lost their arm. All except for I don't know, 5 max have lost their arm above their elbow.
Hmm.
So the highest level, except for shoulder, of arm loss. All of them, all 100% of those have restored at least nominal control to every joint. So they can move their elbow, each degree of freedom of their wrist, and individual fingers. The question, at that point becomes how good are they at it? So when I said nominal, like someone who just lost their arm a year ago might like out of the box.
Hmm.
They're just like flying. Someone, we had a person who lost their arm when they were 2 years old. Now they're 45 or so. and like that was a little different, right?
Totally.
But they did restore control to all their fingers, mostly to their tripod fingers, these,
Hmm.
thumb, index, and middle.
I'm sure you've learned a ton from people that you never could have
Definitely.
predicted before you put it on a person. What are some of those things?
How emotional is it? Because people associate it with trauma,
Oh,
their
sure. Yeah,
amputation.
totally.
And so when they get that control back, it can be like very overriding.
Yeah.
They start crying, we start crying,
Oh,
their family starts crying. It's like, yeah, I know. It's humbling, that's for sure. Anyway, the reason that I say that is because what ended up happening with a lot of people? Like it was the craziest thing. So people get really emotional. They get some control. Like the first guy, for example, whoever restored his index finger with our arm, like he started crying. His family started crying. We all had to take like a 5-minute break. And then he came back and he couldn't get it.
oh,
And
wow.
we are like, wait, what's going on?
Mm.
And it turned out he was basically so excited that he was like literally doing a different muscle
Wow.
configuration. Like he
Yeah.
like couldn't with his phantom limb. He was like too excited with his hand
Wow.
basically. And you could see that also if you ever watch some of the videos of our arm on the internet, every now and then, we don't really tell people this, but every now and then you can see like unintentional, intentional movements, as in like me touching my face right now or
Oh,
doing
yeah.
this
Like
with my
you
hand.
didn't think about it, but it's
Yeah.
just happening.
Like
Oh,
people do
funny.
that. So
Fascinating.
that was like definitely the most unexpected thing. We really didn't expect to see these kind of emergent properties out of it that we did right away. But that was really humbling. I think in terms of like literal sciencey type stuff, though, probably the most unexpected thing we learned was we tried an elbow design, for example, that definitely didn't work. And it was, I don't know how, I probably shouldn't say what it was, but it wasn't pure local actuation. And the trade off was for weight, and we wanted to make it lighter. And I mean, we spent so much time. We burned so much time on like math. It was like math for 6 months. Yeah, literally try to make this thing work. Which, speaking of which, though, is why I'm so impressed by like 1X and everyone else right now, because I think what they've done with a lot of their tendon designs is like super impressive. That's not an easy thing. I don't know how many people know that outside robotics. Like I think Burnt and those guys seem to make it seem very easy. It's not at all. It's very smart too for weight trade off.
Hell yeah. And how close are you then to selling one of these?
We're aiming to be in market in 12 to 18 months.
12 to 18 months. So what has to happen before then?
FDA authorization.
Classic.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You want
Classic.
to talk regulatory? Let's
Yeah,
go.
seriously.
Yeah.
So because it's a medical device.
Yep.
So you have to do like specific kinds of testing before you get to release
We
it, or like
do,
what's
but it's
the
not as much as people would think or the kind people would think. So there's really two different things we have to do. One is FDA clearance or authorization, and the other is clinical trials.
Hmm.
Both are probably quite a bit different than people would think they would be. Most people think clinical trials are like drug studies, and so they're tens of thousands of people or whatever over years. Prosthetic clinical trials, prosthetic arms anyway, are typically like 20 people, and it takes a couple months. It's not that long, each person for a few days. And really, for the most part, all you're trying to demonstrate in the trial is outcomes with the arm. It doesn't really have so much to do with FDA almost at all. It's for the payers. It's for the insurers on the other end who are going to pay for it to know that this thing has a higher level of validation than just what you've done in your office. That's actually like with prosthetics and a lot of medical devices why they go through these trials. Except for, like class 3 pacemakers, stuff like that. FDA authorization is for the most part, trying to determine what the right classification is for your product. So in our case, there's class 1, 2, and 3 medical devices. Class 1 is like a tongue depressor. Class 3 is like a pacemaker or brain implant. It's just risk of life spectrum. And prosthetic arms are almost always class 1. Except for some parts of it, which make it class 2. And class 1, I don't know if you know this, but actually you can just go to market. It's called a pre-market notification. You actually just basically, it's like the equivalent of like sending like a heads up email to the FDA. Like, guess what? We're going to market. Call us if you have any questions. So that's like most prosthetics for that. Class 2, slightly higher standard. You call it clearance. Not a pre-market notification. And that typically is, you do what's called a 510K process, where you find a predicate device, as in, is there another arm that we can say this is substantially equivalent to? Yeah. And so, we anticipate going mostly that route. Yeah.
So 18 months.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Are you good? So how many of this exact thing exist in the world right now?
Of the Gen 2 arm, just this one right now.
Just this one.
Yep, you're looking at the only
That's
one.
awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. And so
So
you guys are gonna build presumably a lot more in the near future. Is
yeah.
this the one that's ready to build a lot of them? Or
Yeah, I guess I actually haven't said this publicly, but this is the design that's ready for clinical trials.
cool.
So yeah, so we are prepped for clinical trials. That was our major goal this spring and this summer, and we're looking to start doing them very soon.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to build 20 or ish to do
That could be TBD. I won't say what we're doing
sure.
publicly for now, but you could go either way. You could just have one and let each person
Oh,
use
and do
it,
it
or you could have
serially. Okay,
multiple. It's probably
understood.
smarter to do it in parallel. Yeah.
Mm.
And then we got, I mean, yeah, 11,000 people on our wait list now. So yeah, probably we'll making quite a few, hopefully pretty soon. Yeah.
Totally. Awesome. So where do you go from here? I mean, so let's say, we do the arm, gets through clinical trials, we start selling them. You talked about the hand being a separate product potentially. What else can you do with this?
There's a couple things, even if you just look at this, right? So to your point, there's the whole arm, or really, this is just the forearm. Actually, I guess I'll reveal a few things here.
Yeah.
So this is actually 3 arms in one, and we'll be releasing 3 products relatively soon after each other. One is the full arm, which has the upper arm, which is a socket. The other is just the forearm and hand for people who lose their arm below their elbow, and then just the hand, or what you'd actually call a hand or fingers, because a lot of people just lose a few fingers.
Sure.
Inside of that too, the neural interface. This needs to be pushed forward, can be pushed forward a lot. There's so many opportunities around this, going invasive, embedded, like we were saying. I think the AI and the data is really where this industry is going to go. Like it comes down to the data getting from your body, to your point, and how well can you process it, and how fast, and what can you do with it. So the robotics, I actually think, will look fairly similar quite a while from now. I think the AI will look quite a bit different. And then we also, I think I said this publicly, I'm not sure. Oh man, our lawyers are going to send me an email later. But, we designed the actuators, like the elbow actuator here, or the wrist actuators, so that they could be used in a leg. So the elbow actuator works as a knee, and the wrist works as an ankle. And the finger actuators, sure, you could potentially use them as like stabilizers in a foot. I don't know
Or
that you
very dexterous toes. Just
right. Get some of those monkey toes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're going to call the product. It's called monkey toes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Good.
Yeah. I think, when I think of the future beyond the arm, what excites me the most is really 3 products that I would love to see us release or support in some way. One is a leg, a breakthrough leg. I don't know if you know this, but you know how bad this stuff is right now today? Legs, there is no user controllable leg in the world. You literally just can't even control it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
I know. I don't understand, but yeah. Another second thing is like a wireless commercial peripheral nerve interface. You need a Neuralink for the brain, or for the peripheral nerves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 3 is the actual AI that controls all that, the machine learning, and that's probably like the least developed of all this stuff, both in the industry in general and even for us. I think that's got the most room to run for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you showing the arm. Good job, arm.
Way to go. I know I should put the cuff on, wave goodbye.
Oh,
Well, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.